In this module, we're going to talk about setting your frame. This is where we decide how many sets of 7 levers you're going to need. This is the first step in applying the 7 levers, and it is the most important step. Now, why do we need to decide how many sets of 7 levers do we need? Well, the 7 levers follow the profit through your business. This is the profit journey that we've already talked about and shown with the 7 levers canvas. These 7 levers act as a group, and they need to line up so that they can compound their effect when we apply our 10% wins. But this definition of each lever, or actually the whole set of levers, will be different for different businesses. So for example, different businesses that are in different sectors will have completely different levers, but even businesses that are similar, or business units or product lines within a business, may have different definitions for some or all of the levers. For example, if you are someone who does coaching but also has an online training course or information product that's available, then some or all of the levers for those product lines are going to be different. Now, if you were just in a business that ran information products and someone else was in a business that ran coaching, they would absolutely be different. But whether they're separate businesses completely, or they are businesses, your businesses or business units or product lines, you need to think carefully about how they need to be separated out. And this is what we mean when we say you may need more than one set of 7 levers, because in Profit Foundations, you're looking at capturing and measuring the right information. So you're going to need to make sure that the levers represent what you're looking at and that things are broken out properly. First of all, so you capture enough data and the right data, but also that you don't capture too much data that becomes confusing and overlaps. All this is about basically don't try and make one set of levers do the work for multiple businesses, because it just won't work. Even at the Profit Foundation stage of the process, you're going to not really get the maximum results that you can if you're not clear from the start. And this is what it's all about. It's about being clear on your goals. First of all, about what we're going to be measuring, but later on in profit growth, we really need to be clear what these levers represent in your business, because when we're coming up with ideas for 10% wins, we'll come up with the most effective ideas when we've got the clarity about the levers. So how do we do all this? Well, in this module, we're going to show you, but basically as an overview, we're going to work backwards, starting with the conversion engine of your business. And we're going to look at those sales funnel levers, and usually if we focus on what is actually a conversion in your business, roughly you can decide whether or not you've got different business units, different product lines, or even completely different businesses, and you can work backwards from there to define whether or not you need, at the highest level, different sets of 7 levers. So you'll be defining your scope, whether the scope of your 7 levers covers your whole business, or you need to break it down into different business units or different product lines. And that's what we're going to do in this module. In this lesson, we're going to look at how you set your frame. That is, how you decide if you need different sets of 7 levers to accurately model and represent your business. Our goal here at the highest level is to really identify if we have different business units or different product lines within your business, or anything else that might mean that we need to separate it out and map it individually with its own set of 7 levers. The first step that we can use to identify whether we need separate sets of 7 levers is to look for obvious divisions inside the business. The first and the most obvious of the divisions is, do you have different cost centers. So is your business big enough that you manage the costs associated with different parts of the business individually? Whatever those different parts of the business sell or represent or whatever it is. If you do, then that's quite an easy way to define that you have different business units and that you might need to map them with different sets of 7 levers. Another way, and it may be similar to the different cost centers approach, would be to look for distinct product lines. Now, they do need to be distinct in some way. So for example, they have different cost centers, or more subtly, they may have different audiences that you handle differently, or there may be some other difference inside the sales funnels themselves. If we drill down into that idea of looking at the sales funnel, we can be a little bit more granular. So if you don't have the most obvious divisions of a distinct cost center or distinct product lines, then you can look at things like, do you have a different conversion engine? So do you have a different way that you transact with customers in different parts of your business? In distinct businesses like retail and e-commerce and service-based businesses, then you might have more obvious differences. For example, in retail, very often it's a till sale. Someone goes up to the cash register and hands over a credit card or cash. In e-commerce, that's an online shopping cart sale, very distinct from the till sale. And in a services business, very often that can be based upon invoicing and bank transfer payments. So are there those kinds of distinctions within your business? Do you have different ways that you transact with people based upon the product lines or products that you have? If so, that would indicate that it might be a good idea to use a separate set of 7 levers. And finally, if you're still really not clear, or you're just looking for a more granular distinction, then you could look to see if you have a difference in the 3 levers that represent your sales funnel. If 2 out of 3 of these differ across products or things that you sell, services that you sell, then you should probably think about mapping a separate set of 7 levers. So those 3 distinct sales funnel levers are suspects, prospects, and conversions. And again, if we go back to the completely separate business idea, then a retail business, suspects might be defined by people who visit your physical store, prospects might be defined by people who try on an item, and conversions are people who purchase an item at the till. And you can clearly see the difference in the 7 levers already if we now look at e-commerce, where those 3 levers are suspects are visit the website, prospects are people who put an item in the shopping basket, and conversions are people who pay via the online shopping cart. Again, another different business would be services, where suspects call the office, prospects request a quote, and conversions may pay the initial invoice. But you can see in those different businesses that all 3 levers are distinctly different. If we were to look at your business, are there product lines or areas of the business that have at least 2 of those different? So hopefully that has helped you set your frame and define whether or not you need to map out separate sets of 7 levers. In this exercise, you are going to set the frame for your business. You're going to decide if you need separate sets of 7 levers. Now, in order to do this, based upon the previous lesson, you might need to do some investigation and possibly even look forward in the material to the module on clarifying your levers. If you can't clearly make a decision and you're not sure whether you should map your whole business or some segments of your business, then you may need to look at it in more detail. Whatever you do, however you come to the conclusion, when you've defined your frame, if you do decide that there might be more than one set of 7 levers, then you should pick one to go through and follow through this course material for the first time. Don't try and address multiple sets of 7 levers at the same time in your first attempt. Just pick one and go through the course, and then come back and apply what you've learned to the other sets of 7 levers. Whatever you decide, why not print out a copy of the 7 levers canvas and fill out the business unit box at the top to get ready for the rest of the work that you're going to do.